This is TWIS. This Week in Science, episode number 944, recorded on Wednesday, September 20th, 2023. You should be skeptical of this show. Hi, everyone. I am Dr. Kiki, and Justin will be hosting this show and filling your head with UFOs, UAPs, and skepticism. But first,
thanks to our amazing Patreon sponsors for their generous support of TWIS. You can become a part of the Patreon community at patreon.com/thisweekinscience.
Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. The following program contains conversations they don't want you to hear. Unsecret knowledge, unhidden truths, plainly viewable facts. All of which can give alternative explanations to improbable conclusions. Merely by being exposed to the ideas in the following disclaimer, you can be disqualified from holding an above super top secret clearance. Believing anything you hear here may prevent you from registering as a member of MUFON. And in extreme cases, being well informed can lead to uncontrollable sneering and snickering whenever an acquaintance tells you their eyewitness account of a UFO sighting. While no one should be ridiculed for their beliefs, the beliefs themselves will hold no such protection in conversations on This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science. What's happening, what's happening, what's happening this week in science.
Good science to you, Kiki and Brian.
and a good science to you too, Justin and Brian and everyone out there. And I'm not supposed to be here, so you
keep saying that.
both are going to be having the best
Yeah.
conversation tonight. I know this.
Well, yeah. As soon as our chaperone leaves the room, we're going to delve into the topic of UAPs and UFOs. Something I've been kind of forbidden to talk about on the regular This Week in Science broadcast.
Which is why I have to leave right now, so that
You need to get out of the.
I'm leaving, but I'm still lurking. There will be a
Yeah.
troll in your comments. Just
That's
wait.
perfectly. You can jump in anytime, rein in the show, save it from being censored, whatever's necessary.
I am so excited that Brian Dunning has joined us this evening, though, or joined you for this discussion, because I'm leaving. Have a wonderful
You're
time.
not here.
I'm not
Are
here
you-
anymore. I'm really not here.
God, I thought you'd never leave.
My goodness, I know. Whew. So we have a jam-packed show set up with things that we carefully crafted for this discussion. Basically, I want to start off this show with something that's not even in the itinerary or the rundown for the show. First, I'm going to jump into science news. This is from this week. The James Webb Space Telescope discovered methane, carbon dioxide, and missing from this headline, dimethyl sulfide on a distant exoplanet 120 light years from Earth named K218. Or actually, that's, I guess, the name of the dwarf star that this planet is circling in the constellation Leo.
K218b. It's
18b is the
second planet.
Is the planet, and then K218 is the dwarf star. So this is uncontestable proof that there might be life on another planet. These are those biosignatures that one would look for that indicates potentially live organisms producing these chemicals and creating this into the atmosphere. That's a nice backdrop, I think, that finding for what we're going to be talking about, because we're going to be talking a little bit about the possibility of life on other planets in our galaxy, and more to the point, whether or not that life has been visiting the Earth.
Indeed.
Yeah. So you have made you made a movie, and I'm sneering a little bit because I've always wanted to make a movie. And so whenever I'm talking to somebody who's actually gone through the whole process of making a movie, I'm initially struck with this intense jealousy and then sort of undeserved animosity towards the person.
I understand all of that. I do.
Yeah. But I actually got a chance to preview the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See, and it's brilliant. It's really well done. So I have to put aside all of my jealousy and my animosity to actually admire the work that you created.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so how does this come about? How do you decide there's enough in my head that I need to discuss on this, and the only way to do it is through the narrative of a movie?
Well, okay. So I work for Skeptoid Media. It's an educational nonprofit. Our main thing has been the Skeptoid podcast, but we're always trying to reach out to new audiences. We're always trying to launch new programming. And one thing that we've been doing the last 5, 6, 8 years is we've always got a movie in production. And sometimes that's an educational film. 2 of them have been 40 minutes long. Sometimes that's a feature documentary that we release through conventional film distribution. It's all a matter of, how can we get our message out there to as many people as possible? And documentary films are one way to do that. And so this was the most recent one. And about just over a year ago, I literally posted on Twitter, what should I make my next movie about? And UFOs is what everyone came back was the most popular answer. It's we're always trying to promote science literacy, critical thinking. That's the basic thing. What the movie is about is actually kind of secondary. It's like, okay, what's the vehicle that we're going to choose to promote our message this time? And UFOs is such a great one because it's just insanely disproportionately popular in society and in pop culture right now. It's just freaking everywhere. So it was the natural choice is to make a movie about UFOs. How do we take a scientific look at the UFO phenomenon?
Yeah, and that's something that I was sort of teasing earlier that I'm not allowed to talk about it much on the normal This Week in Science. We had to craft this opportunity for all the co-hosts to be out of the room, because I don't think they live in the same media bubble that the rest of the planet is on. Because that's sort of what every time I've sort of brought up like what this UAP news that's out there. Like, why are we talking about this? Why are you talking about that? Like, who's talking about that? Who cares? And so it somehow didn't penetrate the scientific bubble that the co-hosts live in. I, on the other hand, love this stuff.
Everyone, it's super popular. A lot of people love this stuff.
The whole reason I'm even doing this show right now is because I was a big fan of radio. And my favorite show on the radio was the Art Bell Coast to Coast.
Sure.
And Art Bell used to do a great job of having guests with good narratives and good stories. Sometimes it was ghost stories, or it would be aliens, or I think my favorite was Richard Hoagland, who would come on and he would have this he would be like connecting dots between, he'd sort of lay out all this information like, whoa, the son of an Egyptologist was working for NASA at the time where they were planning where to land on the moon. And because of the angles in the pyramids, this is the reason they lays out all these dots. And it's sort of like watching this is oldie time, watching a photograph develop where the image just sort of comes across the paper all of a sudden.
We've all
and it was always really, really fun and fascinating, and especially because I didn't believe any of it. It wasn't like I never felt like the show was meant to convince. Even Art would like sometimes have a skeptical question, and then he would go along with it and go, "Oh wow," There was sort of an interplay there. So I've always tracked these sorts of things, but I've seen them in that window of kind of fun to think about, sort of like a cheap version of a sci-fi movie where you didn't have to have any of the special effects. You
Uh-huh.
just have a narrator. What's concerning though is I'm now realizing that yeah, there's a very large percentage of the population that's bought into the stories that are being told. And there's people who are telling these stories. Now, that's fine, but it got to the point where there was a congressional hearing.
There's been about a half dozen of them, it seems, and there's another one tomorrow.
So there's hard evidence, I think, at the first UAP hearing, congressional hearing, that we do need to talk about because I have never seen more convincing evidence that there is a lack of critical thinking in our government. The what was your impression of that? I'm assuming you must have forced yourself at least to watch this.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, for this is what I do for a living. I'm forced to do it for work.
Yeah.
It's like in school when they give you a book to read. It's like in my job, I'm forced to sit through these congressional UFO hearings. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, there is some people in government displaying an astonishing, not only naivete of some pretty basic science issues, but complete failure to do any due diligence. For example, this last most popular hearing with it had the three witnesses, right, which are always
Mhm.
introduced as an intelligence official and two F-18 pilots. No, these guys are career ufologists. These guys have been speaking at UFO conferences. They've been telling stories for years and years and years, and they happen to be veterans. So that means all of a sudden, A plus B equals C. The government believes in UFOs. The military has specialists assigned to UFOs. But if you want to find three military guys who believe in UFOs, you don't go to the military and say, who believes in UFOs? You go to the UFO conference and say, hey, who's ever been in the military? 500 hands go up. You've got plenty to choose from. That's where these three guys came from. They
Yeah.
came from the UFO world. They didn't come from the military world. And if the senators or the Congress people in this subcommittee had done any due diligence into them at all, I mean, simply Google their names. Google their name with the word UFO conference or something like that.
Mm.
And you'll find that these guys are not credible intelligence officials, quote unquote. They're simply UFO guys who've been telling these same old stories for years and years. And the one guy in particular who they're calling a whistleblower,
Mhm. He's calling himself a whistleblower.
he's
I don't
calling
think
himself, yeah,
I don't think he went through the
everyone's
actual.
now calling him a whistleblower. He comes from the whole community of people who have been driving this whole UFO mythology since 2017.
Yeah.
And when he actually named, he only remember in his David Grush is who I'm speaking of. In his testimony, he refused to give almost any specifics at all. He said, "Oh, I can only tell you that behind closed doors.
In a
Oh,
skiff.
I
In
can't
a
answer
skiff.
that question." Yeah, the
In
skiff.
a soundproof phone booth, basically.
Yes, the code of silence from Get Smart.
Yeah.
When he finally gave two specifics, one of them was Roswell, which has been so hilariously debunked for decades that my jaw just about hit the floor. And then the other one he gave was this Italy 1933 story, which was invented by a long hoaxer and immediately dismissed by the rest of ufology as a hoax 25 years ago. and never enjoyed a minute of credibility in any of that time. So you can learn any of this in 5 minutes of Googling, and the Congress people didn't even do that much. So when you say that they're displaying an astonishing lack of critical thinking, they're displaying an astonishing lack of a lot.
Yeah.
And it definitely raises concern for who's running the country.
My jaw drop what came from the revelation, though, that Grush had good information from somebody else about, I think, a third party that had. They said that they had evidence of non-human biologicals recovered near the site, a crash site, and it was the first time I think that I'd heard that term, and it occurred to me that if that's true, it means that humans wouldn't be the only form of life on this planet.
We didn't say it was extraterrestrial; we said it was non-human. That could mean a dog,
or a bacteria, or a bumblebee, or a bird strike on a domestic drone, commercially available drone. But it like, didn't we know that? Don't we know that humans aren't the only form of life on Earth? Like, and the jaw-dropping part wasn't the statement. It was the lack of anybody on the panel going, wait a second. That just means it's not human. It's not. And I wonder if there is like some element of being under oath where who's like, that pigeon drone strike story sounds good if you tell it sideways, but I've got to make sure that I don't overstep here. I don't know. I don't even know if they were under oath. The other thing I took away from that one was the pilot who claims not to be a UFOologist, Fravor
and Graves.
Fravor, Fravor, who claims not to be into UFOs, but then, like you say, just Google it. He's been talking about UFOs for a very long time, goes to all these conferences, does all this stuff. But actually, he was the most believable of the sort of group because of the way he was doing most of his answers. Some of the times he goofed up and overstepped his sort of way he's been presenting himself is just like, I'm just a pilot who saw a thing that I can't explain. I'm not saying what it is. He accidentally did answer a few questions when they were like, well, do you think they could be here probing our defenses? And he's like, oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, well, what do you mean they? What do you mean probing defenses? What are you talking? So he's oversteps it even a couple times in that. But I thought it was interesting. The most believable thing that he said was that he thought it looked, he described it as, I'm going to mess up how big, how long it was. But he described the size of it and that he recognized that because that's the same size as the planes that he's trained to look for.
Right.
Well, if you're up there and you do a great job of this in the UFO movie that they don't want you to see, of explaining how difficult it is for a pilot to identify a size of an object that they're even familiar with, perhaps, but unfamiliar with. But the fact that he assigned it the exact dimensions is something that he's used to seeing, then apparently dictates everything about that interaction. How far away it is, when he moves around it, how quickly it seems to be moving. If he's got a set size that he thinks it is, and it's something much smaller, it would seem to be moving very erratically.
Yeah, and remember the duration of the event was approximately 5 seconds. And he's drawn an awful lot of conclusions from those 5 seconds. And also everything that he talks about with the size of the object being, a football field or whatever it was, it can't be reconciled with the numbers that are shown on his screen.
Yeah, his actual assessment was, I think it's something in the range of, like whatever, however long a jet plane is, like 40 feet or something like that. I don't even know. But that was the thing. It was like, if it is a balloon, but he or something of like this of that size, like a weather balloon or something. But he thinks it's the size immediately of the thing he's used to identifying. Then it's going to act weird when flying around it. The Go Fast video, when I first saw that, it had no audio, and it was a news clip that was sort of teasing it out to talk about it later. And I was like, wow, that really, like, oh my gosh, I've been wrong all these years. They've seen a UFO. They've got it on it. They've tracked it. That thing looks crazy, whatever that is. Maybe. When you hear the audio, though, I didn't even need to wait for all of the trigonometry to sort of tell that it was, a balloon at 12,000 feet moving at 40 miles an hour. And it's the parallax effect of filming from an airplane, 12,000 feet above it or whatever it was. But the audio where the pilots are like, "Oh, hey, got it. Oh, what'd you use? Well, do you manually track it? Nah, I used the auto trackers to actually picked it up. Wow, okay, that's interesting." And then, woohoo! Look at that thing go! Like, if I'm the pilot, I'm like, and there's an object moving at hyper speed off the coast of California. I'm calling NORAD. I'm like getting on the line. Like, we got an incoming. Like, this is an emergency situation. Not woohoo! Oh, hey, what'd you do? The conversation was so casual that you could tell the pilots weren't overly alarmed by this in any way. So even in the evidence that's being produced out there, I think there's quite a bit of sort of self-debunking.
Well, the interesting thing to me about those three Navy videos is once you understand what's happening in each of them, you realize these are such commonplace events that this has got to happen every time anyone goes up. Anytime any pilot goes up and there is any other aircraft at all visible to his FLIR camera, you're going to have essentially this same event is going to be repeated. And so I was wondering, why did anyone save these three videos? The one we have an answer for is the gimbal video, because the video file was, as it came from the Navy, was actually named gimbal.wmv, right? So my personal guess is that somebody saved and made that video as a demonstration of what happens when the camera reaches the end of its range and it has to gimbal so that it can continue pivoting around. That's my guess. But as far as the other three, I don't even know why those videos would be saved, because they're not even unremarkable. They're too unremarkable to even be called unremarkable.
So one of them, I think, was like recorded off of an iPhone 4 or something like this. Like, it was like the pilot had recorded their screen. It wasn't
Really?
actually the Navy's recording on one of them, or at least the first version of it that came out. And I think that's when the Navy maybe released it.
I honestly hadn't heard that, but I also don't. Now that you mention it, I don't know anything about the history of how each one of those videos was saved off of the screen and made.
Yeah, one was I think the Navy released it after the footage that was taken from within the cockpit had been released first. I think that's the scenario that went down.
Okay.
But yeah, so the videos come out, they get thoroughly debunked, which means that the video evidence is not evidence of anything unusual. So we're left then with the eyewitness accounts as still the only, I guess, the most credible sounding, because once you have video evidence and you can tell it's not something supernatural, that it's something moving at 40 miles an hour along with the jet stream at 12,000 feet, that's no longer convincing anybody that we're being visited from by, and also the leap to it being other planets. Yeah, has anybody looked at the fact that all these pilots describing things that seem like they might be, spherical objects? Now that we know that there's Chinese spy balloons occasionally flying over the United States, like, maybe we should have been reporting this, actually. And maybe if you did see a balloon, like the Go Fast video, that could have been a Chinese spy balloon. Instead, they made a UFO conspiracy out of it instead of actually like reporting it and then trying to get that thing shot down.
If we're considering the possibility that these are alien spaceships from other star systems, why are we not considering the possibility that your neighbor who is a psychic used their powers to imprint this onto the video? Where did we make the leap from here's a video I don't understand to aliens from another star system? That's an astonishing leap of logic to me.
Yeah, and some of it must just be that that actually doesn't Fox Mulder from X-Files have a poster that says "I want to believe"?
Very good. You're the pop culture god.
Yeah, that's probably a big part of it. You know, when you have this belief that this thing is happening and this thing exists, any scrap that seems to provide you with evidence of that reaffirms that idea and is probably very tempting to suspend all doubt and just believe, I suppose. So that's going to bring me real quick to NASA's reluctant role.
Okay. All right.
And first, I want to stop letting NASA administrators speak in public. I don't know, from the James Webb Space Telescope rollout to every conference or committee meeting they've held publicly with the UAP things recently. NASA administrators are terrible communicators. They're stuck somewhere between trying to do this knockoff impression of Carl Sagan and it's like you're not that person. Like Carl Sagan was a very special individual who had a prose at his fingertips for describing the universe. Using similar sounding words in a monotone, unenthusiastic voice is not the same. They need to stop. But then also, like, poor NASA. Poor NASA. Here's a new mandate. We need you to look into this.
Yeah,
NASA,
I just imagine them just groaning when they got that. It's like, are you friggin' kidding me? It's not like they don't have anything better to do.
Okay, fund us separately for it. More than happy, I guess.
Yeah, I mean the guys, the people who are on this particular NASA panel, they seem to be from very diverse backgrounds. I don't know most of them. I didn't know a number of names. I knew one or two of them were actually people I'd met, and they're very cool, but they don't work for NASA. The ones that I knew. So yeah, somehow somebody threw together a budget and said, I guess, and pay some people to do this and handle this for us.
Yeah.
So hopefully it wasn't taking time away from regular NASA employees who did have better things to do. I see someone mentioned in the comments about the NASA administrators being retired astronauts. Charles Bolden was very good at public communication. I know he was not very popular as a NASA administrator. Bridenstine was, I don't think Bridenstine had been an astronaut, but he's someone that I believe he was a naval aviator. I could be wrong about that, but he was someone who surprised everyone with being a very good NASA administrator, and I kind of wish he'd stuck around. He was a big surprise. The current guy, though, Bill Nelson, is a disaster every which way you take it. Not only is he bad at communicating, but he is probably the worst NASA administrator, in my opinion, that we've ever had, just in terms of waste and pork and putting this ludicrous, useless SLS program above all else. Anyway, I digress.
Well, no, you don't have to, because he opened up his it felt like a 2-hour speech. I think it was 7 minutes. and talking about what NASA's role was going to be in UAPs. Start off by talking about the current Mars mission, how we're collecting tubes of rock samples from the mouth of a river on Mars, which I get where he got calling it the mouth of a river, but still, like, you're entering into the fray of conspiracy theory world in broaching this subject, and you're going to start off talking about rivers on Mars, and then NASA has the brilliant idea, you know what, we're going to make everything transparent and scientific and make transparency and open information the goal of this, and we're going to have a secret administrator of this program who we're not going to tell you who it is, and it's going to be a secret. And they're doing it because nobody wants the job. Nobody wants to get the blowback from the crazies. And so they're not identifying who's heading up the new UAP research department, which is going to do nothing but feed the beast. And it's going to come out because they're going to figure out who it is anyway. So it's pointless. And it just shows a completely tone deaf to the situation. What I think they should have done is gone up and had it, not administrators and not this assembled group of people who really might believe that some of this could be possible in some level, and we're going to look into it with open eyes, and see where it takes us. They should have just had some hardcore research. This is where the scientists come up and explain the 10 different reasons why it's not UFOs, and here's what we've debunked, and we've never found any evidence, and none of what the reports are credible, and here's why they aren't credible, and here's how science actually works. Something I want a sort of cold, to the facts, analytical front to NASA, so that I believe that the missions are worth the money. Because, like you said, if we are having this SLS slush fund stuff going on, like, if I can see why, if the administrators are acting behind the scenes like they're talking in front of the camera, then I've lost confidence in what NASA should be doing. Maybe I'm too harsh on NASA administrators, but they really need somebody else.
The NASA administrator is a difficult job. There's no doubt about it. I mean, that's a damned if you do, damned if you don't job. But I think that if there was one thing the NASA administrator should do, it's to put the science at the top, and that's where we are not right now. They have this thing called the Decadal Planetary Science Survey. I'm getting that wrong, but I hope someone who knows what I'm talking about knows it right. I'm not Googling right now. But that's basically what all of the scientists want to be prioritized. And they do it every 10 years. That's why it's called the Decadal Survey. And guess what is not ever been on that Decadal Survey? It's anything pertaining to the SLS or a moon base or the Artemis moon mission, which all of that is purely a justification for the SLS rocket. And the SLS rocket exists only as a pork project to keep budget flowing to legacy shuttle contractors. Wow. Literally wasted money. It's a program that has no potential to do anything useful. If you want to have the Artemis system, fine, you can do it with SpaceX hardware. You don't need the SLS. But scientists say we don't even need the Artemis system. It's a, rah, 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 wave the flag, America to the moon. Not that that's a bad thing, but I wouldn't prioritize it ahead of projects like, let's get out to Titan, and let's get out to Europa, and let's drill down through the ice, and let's find if there's life in these oceans here in the solar system. That's what the scientists want. Anyway, I digress again. I get off on tangents.
No, that's fine. It's also the shift, I think, that took place in NASA over the years, from NASA astronauts being jet pilots test pilots or military folks to more scientists
The right stuff,
being
guys.
astronauts.
Yeah.
We've moved into the field where playing golf on the moon isn't really going to do much for us. Anyway,
It's
not that
cool.
it is cool though.
No, I mean you're right though. I mean the whole thing with the hotshot pilot, we've done that, and we can do it again if we need to, but we just don't need to anymore. It's been done.
And by the way, our scientists have figured out they can do their job from home. They can send a robot that can do all of the stuff there, so that they don't have to go up in a multi-billion-dollar firecracker to try to get there. So here's the question, though. So we've talked about NASA's got this group, and there was these panels in front of Congress, and there's these collections of people who are starting to look at this from different angles. Where's your invite? Where's your invite to the panels, to these research committees? Where's the skeptics who have been looking at this stuff for years and years and years that can shortcut, like you mentioned, all they needed to do was a Google search. And it seems like if you were sitting down there as the fourth person, I don't know which side you want to be, on one side or the other of that panel, that could have said, "Oh, well, that was already figured out, and many years ago." And this,
You're singing my tune. Yeah. No, I mean this is something that I talked about in my UFO movie. Was what is the problem with these panels, and how could these panels be done better? And now, when I made the movie, this was finished. It finished shooting, I don't know, December or so, and then it was in post production. So the most recent UFO hearings haven't happened yet when I made the movie, but that doesn't matter because there's nothing new to the science in there. But we get a vision into who are they putting on these panels, and it is not people who should be on the panels. The examples that I talked about in the movie were when Scott Bray, who was the head of the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, I believe, he was talking about they've got a metallurgist, and they've got a meteorologist, and they've got a physicist. And okay, let's see, what are those people good at? What does a metallurgist do? He analyzes metal. Okay, so here's a piece of metal. Actually, this is from a Robotech little guy that I've got on my desk here. But okay, so here's a piece of metal that we can analyze to tell if it came from another planet. Okay, we don't have that. We do not have any metal that needs to be analyzed. We've got blurry videos. We're jumping way too far ahead by putting a metallurgist on the panel. We need people who can tell us about blurry videos. Yeah. And honest to God, I'm not advocating this, but you could get a Bigfoot hunter would be better to have on one of these panels than a metallurgist. The thing that I advocated for, two main things that I really advocated for. First of all, UFO skeptics. People who have been writing books about UFOs for 50 years and who have been debunking UFO cases and pointing out why this was actually Venus and why that was actually Venus. Now, granted, that's something that suggestion is something that a lot of UFO fans would react to with hostility, because they say, "Oh, the debunkers, we don't want their opinion. They made up their minds before they ever got here." Okay, but if you want your panel to actually be objective and to consider all perspectives, then at a minimum, include the people who have been doing this exact job for their entire career. We don't have a single UFO skeptic on any of these panels who would have been able to get rid of these UFO videos in 2 seconds, and that never even would have been a thing after 2017. Right. And there's still a huge thing because there are still no UFO skeptics on the panel. And the other thing that I advocated for was someone from the NTSB, basically an air crash investigator, because they understand the things that fool pilots.
Yeah.
And that also would have made all three of these UFO videos from the Navy non-starters in 2017. Because the things that fool pilots are myriad. And people sitting at their desks don't understand what those are, but NTSB investigators do. So those are two critical inclusions that these UFO panels should have on them.
Yeah, and then that would also give us insight into why so many UFOs crash. Because somebody put together, like, actually, if you add up all the reports of crashed UFOs, they crash at a higher rate than commercial aircraft. Like, much higher.
That's true.
Like several hundred-fold higher.
I hadn't considered that, but that's a good point. They do, yes.
They're just terrible, terrible pilots. Maybe they could use some of that NTSB info. It's like, oh, so we're misidentifying these planes as much smaller than we thought they were. Oh, okay. Oh, your planet's only how big? No wonder we keep running into it.
The difference is we can go to an air crash site and we can find bits of metal, but so far, nothing from any of these UFO crash sites.
And but I thought that was a great point from the film, but also, like, the skeptic community is actually the only community that's actually been researching UFOs, because there's those who are pushing forward narratives that UFOs exist, and they stop at, here's an eyewitness report, now I've told it to you, all done. But the skeptics actually are the ones who go through, figure out what time of year it was, which direction was this, what else is going on in that area. There's a great example that you have in the movie, which is I think it was the first sort of debunked UFO story that I remember hearing, but I thought you did a much better job of it. And it's actually of a verified UFO sighting.
What does that mean?
It means it was an actual event, and they were able to. It wasn't something somebody made up. It's verified in that they discovered the UFO.
Okay.
And that was I can't remember the name of it now. It was the British military base, or is it a U.S. military base?
Rendlesham. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what I mean by a verified UFO is that it was unidentified object, and then it was verified what it was. They discovered what the UFO was eventually, which was a lighthouse.
Yeah.
That had a red light through the fog, and it seemed to be hovering like a red light in the forest, sort of glowing, and it got reported by a bunch of military members. The thing that I'd never heard before, and I don't know if I knew that there was audio recording of it or not, but there was an audio recording of the witnesses being interviewed by military police or something. And that was also like, here's real evidence that military actually reported it. And in this audio, you can hear them seeing it again, because look, there it is, kind of a thing. The way you handled that in the film was something I hadn't seen before, and I thought was really well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I don't know if you want to tell that story, or if we should just leave that as a teaser for everybody to go and see the UFO movie they don't want you to see.
I was going to tell it until you suggested that, so now I'm not going to. We're going to leave it as a teaser.
No, I would leave that as a teaser because it's my it's one of my favorite parts in there, because it was a story that I thought that I knew. But it had a twist to it that you illustrate brilliantly there that I hadn't been aware of, that really kind of brings it home. So in that too, in the title, they.
Yes.
Who is the they that you have in mind?
So I'll say a couple of things about the title. First of all, it sounds like a silly, stupid title that makes the movie lose credibility right off the bat. But I mean, how do you title a movie about the UFO phenomenon, right? And now I had a whole bunch of people, some of whom I see are in the comments right now, who were focus grouping and workshopping titles for me. We had a whole long list of titles. We went through all these rounds of surveys and voting and what's a good title. And somebody threw the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See onto the list as a joke, right? As a joke. And instantly it led the voting, and it led the voting ever since. And I'm starting to think, look, guys, obviously I'm not going to call the movie that. We need something real here. But then it occurred to me that we're all talking about that title. We've been workshopping titles for 2 weeks, and this is the one we're all talking about. It's something people remember, and that's a quality you can't buy in a movie title. So I finally decided, you know what? Hell with it. Let's go with that. If it makes the movie appeal to some people who are, fairly far on the UFO conspiracy theory spectrum, and they watch the movie because of the title, that's great. All the better. Anyway, who is they? It's not purely tongue-in-cheek. Because if you look at what's popular on television right now, on the pseudoscience and pseudohistory networks, it's all of this UFO programming. It's Ancient Aliens, it's Skinwalker Ranch, it's unidentified this or that. These are shows that are popular because viewers don't have great science literacy. If viewers had better science literacy, Ancient Aliens viewership would go into the toilet. So there actually is an element out there, particularly in Hollywood, who does not want you to have better science literacy about these topics. So when we say this is the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See, this is a movie that teaches astronomy using the public interest in UFOs as a springboard. And when it educates people from that perspective, it makes them less of a good target audience. It makes them worse red meat, if you will, for any of these UFO shows like Ancient Aliens, et cetera, et cetera. So the title actually does make sense, and so I've made peace with it, and I'm happy with it.
Yeah, that was actually my take on it too. It's like when you first see it today, it's like, oh, the deep state, the government, it's all the Illuminati don't want you to know about this. And at the end, you realize, oh no, it's talking about the grifters, the people who are propagating this sort of non-scientific nonsense. Although I have come to some level of peace with Ancient Aliens.
I'm listening.
I haven't really watched much of it because it's utter nonsense. But I get that in my desire to make a movie and my jealousy and animosity towards anyone who actually has, if you got picked up for, like, say they did this as a goof and a short and they got 3 or 4 episodes picked up, okay, we did our thing. Now the network's like, yeah, we need you to produce 12 of these a year, or 20 of these a year. Now I might have actually thought I had a good, story about, like, oh, there's this weird thing about how they built the pyramids. Like, it's unexplained. But now I got to come up with one every week. So of course you're going to have to stretch credulity to the just utterly breaking point every week because you have a contract now to come up with nonsense on a weekly basis. And I think that's what people forget. It's not like, hey, we discovered this thing and we have to publish. We have all these experts together and we have to publish on this because this is important information. It's, we've been contracted to do 20 episodes. So we have a writing team that's back there furiously working out how to make something mysterious out of mundane archaeology.
Okay, let me ask you a question. How many years has This Week in Science been going?
How many years?
How many years?
Yeah, depending on the way how you do the math, depending on the initial is over 20 on a weekly
And
basis.
how many times have you had to stretch credulity to fill one of those episodes?
Oh, maybe once.
0. Okay. I've been doing the Skeptoid podcast for 17 years. The 17th anniversary is coming up in two episodes. That'll be 900 and something shows. I have had to make something up or exaggerate things 0 times.
Yeah.
It is very, 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 very possible to cover these subjects from a good science perspective and from a good storytelling perspective, especially if you've got a giant staff of people and friggin' History Channel's budget behind you. So I have no sympathy for them. I have 0 sympathy for them from that perspective. I do not agree that you have to stretch credulity. I say that it's easy and cheap. It's the dark side that's, more seductive, whatever it is. That I cannot give them a pass for that.
I mean, like, so would you? Do you have that same level of stretching credulity when when watching science fiction? Like, oh well, wait a second. If they're on different planets, their communication can't be real time. They got to have at least a 8 minute to 2 hour delay, depending on how far the planets are. Or like 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 if you go in knowing that this is science fiction, that they're doing storytelling.
Yeah.
We don't look at people aren't going, oh gosh, did you see the last Fast and Furious? Yeah, they had the physics all wrong. Like cars don't do that. Gravity doesn't operate that way. Like are they being held to too high of a standard because they're addressing actual science and not just messing up the science and telling their story?
I have no problem with suspending disbelief, and I can enjoy science fiction, whatever it is. If it's a good story, I don't care if it gets fake gravity, magical space communication. Those don't bother me in the slightest. I'm very happy to enjoy good fiction. But also, I mean, what I do for a living and what you guys do as well is finding ways to make reality into good entertainment without cutting any corners at all. And to the degree that we're able to, making it entertaining and weaving it into a good story. To the degree that we're able to. And we're both very small teams. We don't have a huge budget behind us. We don't have a staff of writers throwing ideas and filling in all of the space. And yet we're still able to do it.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that thing about suspending disbelief for science fiction, because that brings me to the second part of the show. Because I think we're in the second half. I think we're supposed to take a break. Do you need a break?
I don't, but if there's supposed to be a break,
No, there's supposed to be a break. We say something, oh, you got to like the channel, you got to follow and subscribe. I usually tune out, so I don't really know what Kiki does in the middle. I go get a cup of coffee, refresh. So you're a skeptic and a critical thinker. I'm different. I'm wired differently. I'm not as much of a skeptic. I tend to believe everything I hear, but I still maintain a bit of a critical eye. So
you're a more normal person. That's okay. That's a merit.
Yeah. Well, I do some science journalism writing, and so the way I've realized that I'm approaching things is I'm suspending all disbelief. I'm not questioning anything about. I'm assuming this is a well-vetted research study, that this is curated information that's been through a scientific process. There's an institution behind it. There's reputational, on the line for the researchers doing it. They're presenting it. Either it's been peer reviewed or it's going to be. And so I'm just sort of retelling their story without as much jargon. Although sometimes I find something, maintaining that critical eye, the data's wrong. The data doesn't match their conclusion. They've come to a conclusion in this, but their data is saying actually something that they also presented is saying something very different. So if we apply that sort of approach, where we have a skeptic who's a critical thinker and somebody who's willing to speculate as a critical thinker, but maybe less skeptically, if we suspend all disbelief and take eyewitness accounts as the evidence, where would that lead?
that would lead to an enormous can of worms.
Yeah.
If the criterion is that verbal reports are to be equated with inerrant literal accounts, I mean,
Because
what's not
because
true then?
this is what people are listening to. If this is what they're using as their evidence, because I'm convinced that everybody is a critical thinker and on some level could be a scientist,
Oh yeah,
but they
it's a spectrum, and everyone's somewhere on the spectrum. Sure.
but I believe that there are really intelligent people out there who, for whatever reason, are driving a truck instead of delving into the molecular interactions of COVID virus versus our immune system,
I agree
but are still
completely.
able to make connections between things.
Yes.
Here's I'll start us off. The first thing, if I'm believing all of these reports, there's almost you have to give the whole backstory of life, right? The first thing that jumps out is that in almost all of the classic descriptions, Roswell, Barney and Betty Hill, the Travis Walton, all of these accounts, one thing that's consistent is the description of the beings, the aliens. You don't need an autopsy. Lay out any of these on a table, invite an anthropologist, they'll walk in and say, hominin. There's one planet where hominins are known to exist, and that is the Earth. Even if you took the 15 to 20 billion planets, which I think almost all of them will have life, because it's just chemistry and physics. You have to get up beyond bacterial life to a complex life, to an intelligent complex life, to a scientifically intelligent complex life, to then where we would still need to go to get to interstellar travel. And then on top of all of those thresholds of probability, you're going to throw in, oh, and they have to be hominins.
Sure.
That to me is the one that says it's not aliens.
That I think that is an excellent point. I hadn't heard it put quite that way before, but yeah, no, I agree with you completely. When you consider all of the possible forms that life could take, you know, why would they happen to be tetrapods with, you know,
and that's
with
in
a head and a face?
that's in believing the eyewitness accounts. Even if you say I'm going to suspend all doubt and believe what they're saying is hominins, which is Earth. Now there is something else that is near and dear to me in the reports. There's a lot of reports of, how do you say, prostate exam and collection of biological materials. The people seem to be either put to sleep or sort of in a daze, like sedated during these events.
Mhm.
They usually are picked up someplace secluded, away from the rest of humans. This behavior from the alien perspective sounds very familiar, actually. It sounds like what scientists do when they're collecting specimens from animals. You get one that's sort of away from the rest, you put it to sleep, and then you sample it biologically so you can take that back to the lab, because you don't need the being back at the whole animal. You can look at the microbiome. So what are hominins doing looking at the microbiome of other hominins? They're scientists. That's what it has to be.
That would make sense. I mean, if you know, we have one data point for what intelligent alien astronauts would do, and that one data point is ourselves. It's what have we done when we've gone to other planets. And if you look at what we're doing on Mars, we haven't been there ourselves, but we've sent proxies, as the a much less energy expensive option. But what are they doing? They're doing all kinds of little science experiments. They're drilling into rocks and looking for things. And they're doing little gas chromatograph experiments, and they're trying to learn everything that they can. So there's lots of different reasons that one race would choose to visit an alien planet if they could. But one of those reasons is why we would do it, which would be to run all those science experiments. So, if we put ourselves into the position of aliens visiting Earth, I'm not saying we'd do anal probes, but
microbiome from the biological science world, you will learn more about an organism through its microbiome than you will with months of observation.
Sure, but I mean, would you even be ready for that fire hose of data? I mean, just give me a skin sample from the little frog that we find on the planet. I don't need its microbiome yet. I'll look at that tomorrow. Just let me have.
Well, they might have done that too. They might have gotten a nice. That might just be the thing that's remembered for some reason.
If my tricorder can store all the data, then I'll take a shot of it with my tricorder. But
yeah. So if we believe now all the reports, we now have hominins who are conducting science, and I think you've made this point before too, that they're not here for. They wouldn't be here for interstellar domination because they haven't destroyed anything, and they wouldn't be here to teach us all the secrets of the universe, because they haven't made that kind of contact either.
Well, let me before I don't, not to interrupt, but let me clarify. I don't mean that they wouldn't be doing that, because some of them might. All I mean is that we don't appear to have been visited yet by any who would do either of those two things.
To do either of those.
Because nobody has destroyed us and nobody has jumped out on the White House lawn. Not saying they wouldn't, just saying we don't appear to have been visited. Anyway, that's I interrupt. Go ahead.
So no, you're not interrupting. I'm going to keep talking too much, so that's why you need to interrupt.
That's why I brought plenty of whiskey. So go for it.
Perfect. So here's the thing: if it's hominins, and they're doing science, and we believe all the reports that we don't have film of UFOs, of advanced technology, because all the video evidence that we have debunks them being advanced technology. So we still have to go to the eyewitness accounts, because we don't even have any of the myriad of crash sites to investigate. How would a hominin from Earth, who's doing science and has advanced technology, where would that come from?
Where would it? I don't follow the question. Where would it come? Which come from?
So if there's a hominin that is from the Earth, that's doing science with an advanced technology, where is it? What country is it in? Right? Is this from the descriptions? I can kind of go it kind of looks like a hominoleti, maybe. Maybe there's an ancient archaic hominin that moved underground and then perfected air travel technology. Because this is an interesting factoid that's out there. It's that the vast majority of reports of UFOs, this is why I think NASA pointed this out, and they're like, why should we study this? Are below commercial aircraft in terms of altitude. They're actually all very, very low flying things. They're not high orbiting and around they're not up there with the satellites looking down at us. Okay. They always seem to be lower than commercial aircraft, which seems like hominoleti would be, if they're living underground full time, developing advanced technologies. That would, to me, that's the part that would be the tough one, to perfect air travel while living underground.
No, you're right. I mean, if we were to plan a mission to another planet. I mean, let's say we found a planet that we could get to. That in itself is an enormous leap. But let's just say that. Let's say, okay, here's a planet, and we're going to send a craft to it, manned or unmanned, either one. What capabilities are we going to put? Now, right away, we've got all of our different science agencies are going to be bickering with one another for, okay, I want 1 gram of weight for this. And someone says, I need 2 grams of weight for this science experiment. And then someone says, I want the whole thing to be able to fly down into the atmosphere, perform aerodynamically, shoot down the Enterprise, whatever it's going to do,
Yeah.
land, conduct experiments, take off again, fly around some more. That guy, it's going to be really hard for that guy to get his experiment onto the spacecraft. But there's going to be a lot of competing interests. It's just such an absurdly high energy proposition to do anything more than, I mean, even assuming orbit is a high energy proposition, because you have to slow down to get into that orbit, and that takes fuel. And do you plan to return? That's going to take a massive amount of fuel to reaccelerate and gain escape velocity. There's so much to think about when you're saying, oh, that UFO must be a spaceship from another planet. You're making so many massive assumptions. Most people don't realize the scope of the assumptions they're making with that small suggestion.
Yeah, and it doesn't seem to create a pause either. If you're describing the size of the galaxy and how far away something, how much time it takes to travel at the speed of light to get to different stars, like the one that we talked about, where they might have seen a hint of elevated methane carbon
Yeah.
dimethyl sulfides 120 light years away. That doesn't mean even that it would take us 120 years to get there, because we don't have speed of light travel.
Yeah.
It means that it would take us I didn't do the math on this one, but
Don't.
100 generation spacecraft where because of limited space and resources, once people got to a certain age, they get pushed out the airlock to maintain a stable population. And in 2,000 years, hopefully they still remember that they were on a spaceship and that there was a mission.
I've got a funny story about that. So I took my daughter to a conference called SETICon 2, put on by the SETI Institute. What year was this? It's probably about 2012, give or take. Was the last time they had this conference, and I think my daughter was probably about 13 or 14 at the time. And I was taking her around, and I was introducing her to people. She'd always wanted to meet Mae Jemison, the astronaut. I introduced her to Mae Jemison. And Mae Jemison was, I'm not sure if she still does this, but she was on the board of a project called the 100-Year Starship Project, which was, just as it sounds, sort of a think tank for, let's have some kind of a plan if there was to be some kind of a cataclysm that was going to destroy the Earth, and we needed to build a multi-generational starship to preserve a core of humanity. Now that is a reasonable thing for someone to be thinking of, because we might find out tomorrow, hey, here's an asteroid that's going to destroy the Earth in 5 years. So now you're going to have 5 years to put a 100-year starship plan into effect. So they
and so this would, the starship would it be going to a different star, or would it just be hanging out in orbit until the planet kind of came back a little bit?
Now that's a great question, and I don't know the answer, but I presume that the 100-Year Starship Project people had an answer to that, or maybe they had various contingencies. I don't know, but regardless, they had a panel, and sitting on the panel was Mae Jemison was on the panel, Robert Picardo, who was the hologram doctor from Star Trek and a member of the Planetary Society. He was on the panel. I think Bill Nye was on the panel. I think Seth Shostak was on the panel. And there was probably 2 or 3 other people as well. And so here's a line of people standing at the microphone to ask questions about the 100-year starship. And a lot of them are like, oh, what are you going to do for a food source? How are you going to give water for that many people? Whatever their questions were. And here comes my daughter. She's standing in line. I love her for this because it was the most awesome thing ever. So she gets up to the microphone, and the people on the panel are saying, oh, here's the little kid. She's going to ask us some cute question. That'll be cute. Let's hear what she has to say. And she says, is it morally right to give birth to a generation of people who are going to have no say in their future? And the panel was like stumped. And I thought it was so awesome that the little kid was able to stump the panel.
Well, they didn't want to tell her. It's like, well, actually, that's already happened. We've been doing that for a while, actually. That's it's called society. No matter where you are, there you are. No choice.
Anyway, I love that. That's my 100-year
question.
starship anecdote.
So my conclusion from all the hominin and the science and everything is that they would have to be future humans. Future humans coming back in their own timeline to collect microbiome for a future where they've used too many antibiotics.
So you're writing a science fiction story now, and this is the
no,
context of your story.
It's bigger than that. It's bigger than that, because why would they come back in this time zone? Because traveling back in your own timeline must be very dangerous. It's like Back to the Future. You know, you could disappear from the photograph at any given moment if you step on the wrong bug. Because the only place you can travel, if you and I were to go and travel back in time and safely not affect our future, we could go to one place that I know of, which is Pompeii, after the last boat has left, but before the volcano has gone. So I'm not writing a science fiction book. I'm creating a end of the world cult. See, the aliens are here because they're future humans, and they're safe to be here because the world's about to end for most of humanity. And so that's why it's safe for them to be here. And it's going to be in 5 to 10 years, because I've been told that's gives you enough urgency to recruit for an end of the world cult, but enough time to also fleece the flock. It's that sweet spot. So it's going to be 10 years, the world's going to end. That's why the UFOs are here. They're future humans who aren't going to be affected by our future.
So let me ask you a question. Yeah. And this is a serious question.
Yeah.
You're from Denmark, right?
Oh, not from. I'm from Davis, California, but I'm living here in Denmark.
You're Denmarkian.
Yeah.
So therefore, you must know Bob. I'm trying to remember who's.
I do know Bob. I know Bob very well.
Was it Utsi? Utsi, the Iceman?
Yeah.
Who was found in the glaciers of
in the Alps.
That's why I'm asking you, because Denmark is nowhere near the Alps.
Yeah.
So do they have a microbiome from him?
Oh, that's a really good question.
And does this put your whole thesis, does it make it moot? Because if microbiomes can be preserved in these long preserved, I'm not sure even how old he is.
Well, see, the problem,
something, wasn't it?
The problem with going back there, though, is it's too far away from my end of the world prediction. See that, but you go back too far in time and you mess up your future timeline. Yeah, anybody you talk to has this butterfly effect of then the future events turn out differently and you don't exist. Oh, that's no good. That's no good. You can't have that, Brian. But if you're at Pompeii right before the volcano, then you're safe. Then you can talk to everybody. They might as well. I don't know why they didn't go and get the microbiome samples there. They were probably much more diverse than they would be now. But my point, though, is that I'm going to start a a cult with predicting the end of the world, and if you send me enough money, we may be able to convince the future humans to take you out of the danger zone. But also that like there's so many other creative imaginings you could make out of even the eyewitness reports. Even if you took them literally, you could go in a tremendous number of different directions with them. That it's curious that it's only aliens, and the only reason I can think that it's only aliens in their conclusions is that these are all just primed ideas. That seeing something unusual creates that leap because they've been primed to believe that that's the most reticent possibility. I think if instead of UFO lore there was future human time traveling lore, then every time we saw something like that, we go, "Oh, it must be the future humans." Like even you could switch it out with ghost stories. You could be, "Oh, wait, did you hear that door shut? Yeah, it must have been a future human visiting." Like you could just replace almost the entire canon of UFOs or ghosts with something else. None of it actually ties to the conclusion of aliens, and that's what I find fascinating about the whole thing is that there's no reason. Like it's almost
Yeah.
the meme for the ancient aliens guy. It's aliens. Like only because you're saying that.
No, you're right. I mean, that goes back to what I was saying with a projection from your psychic neighbor. How did we get to aliens, and why is it that of all of the other billions of directions we're going to go, if we have no rules now, if special relativity isn't a thing and there's no rules and we can just make up anything, why is it aliens? Why isn't it leprechauns? Why isn't it the people who live inside the hollow earth? It's just one of these silly leaps of logic.
Well, it's really silly because also you talk about it pretty well in the movie. Actually, the vastness of space, the amount of distance and time required to travel places, and the amount of the age of the universe, meaning that even if you make it through all those probability filters, life I think is the lowest bar. I say life is on 100% of Earth-like planets, and according to that Jay West, and even an un-Earth-like planet may have life. I think life is probably on its most basic form on every one of these Earth-like planets. Again, chemistry and physics, it may have started 100 times on this planet. We only know of one because once something is there, it fills all the bio niches. And if life starts anew tomorrow on planet Earth somewhere, it's just food for a microbe. It's gone. Like it could still be happening. It's not, that part's not that to be out of bounds. But when you get into all the other filters, and then it's a hominin too. Okay, fine.
Well, I'll tell you one other thing. I went to an astrobiology conference once, and I don't know how common astrobiology conferences are, if these are things that happen every year somewhere. But number one, I've never felt so out of my depth in my life. This was a huge conference. I think it was at Arizona State University. I think it was 2017, 18, somewhere around in there. But the rooms were huge, and I was amazed how many astrobiologists there are in all of these conference rooms, and the number of things that these people had thought of and were prepared for. And I'm talking about like different spectra to look for. You remember the Horta from Star Trek? Okay, that's one form. That was like silicon-based life, and we're carbon-based life.
Yeah.
And
The rock creature.
There's 1,000 others. Not 1,000, but there's plenty of others. And people have thought about what all of those possible spectra would look like. And they have considered so many questions and so many possible forms of life. I was blown away And when I say I'm out of my depth, it was because they were talking about really technical issues with analyzing spectra and things like this that was just so far above me. But I remember in one of the breakout rooms, they did a poll and they just asked, "Hey, exactly what you were talking about just now. How many people think that life is on almost everything that's round and has been floating in space? There's some kind of a planet. How many people think it's on virtually everyone in some form?" And again, we're talking about pretty broad range for what is life and what form can life take. And there was a lot of hands that went up. So you're not alone when you say that. But also, I should point out how many of them think that it's virtually zero and it's on 0.001%, and a lot of hands went up there too, and everywhere in between. So I mean, this is an early science. I mean, we are infants in the science of astrobiology.
Yeah. Although we've been making strides in discovering how the basic building blocks
Yeah,
form from natural events, and that's the part that makes me think the chemistry of if the chemistry and physics is the same throughout the universe. I think there's life out there. But again, my definition of might be a giant virus. It might be RNA life is on all of these planets, and bacteria is very rare even. And one of the things that too is I had never seen your Christmas tree analogy. I hadn't really seen that one
no, I claim that as
presented
my
before.
personal contribution to the field.
Okay,
The
I
Christmas tree
really
problem.
like that. That was
Thank you.
cool. Um, that again is another one of those thresholds where what is it? How do you? Well, maybe you should describe it because I'll do a terrible job. But
Yeah.
of different life coming and going on planets.
So everyone understands the distance problem. We say, oh, it's too hard to get from one star system to another because of relativity and all the issues and the energy requirements and everything. So the distance problem is one that we're all familiar with why it's difficult for alien civilizations to visit one another. But another problem that a lot of people fail to consider is the time problem, and this is what I call the Christmas tree problem. If you imagine a Christmas tree filled with strings of blinking lights, and there's blinking lights all throughout the body of the Christmas tree, and lights are on, lights are off, lights are on, lights are off, and the duration of each light represents the lifespan of a technological civilization. And by technological civilization, we're talking about one that's capable of understanding and communicating with life on other worlds. So if the distance problem is one, that means it's hard to go from one blinking light to another blinking light, and maybe it's not even going to be on anymore by the time you get there. There could have been a gamma ray burst, a pandemic, a war, the sun could have gone nova. There's a million things, a planet killer asteroid. There's a million things that can terminate a technological civilization. We'll die one day somehow. We don't know how. But so you have to have two of these blinking lights turn on that are right next to each other, and they have to be on at exactly the same moment for these two civilizations to have any hope of finding out about each other and then communicating with each other. And so the time problem, the Christmas tree problem, makes the whole issue so much worse and so much less likely. And as I say in the film, that's a problem that we hate because we would love to visit with our neighbors somehow.
And in that scenario too, it occurred to me, our light just came on, like just came on. In terms of
not even a century ago.
Yeah, so we're not going to even be visible to anything other than maybe this methane super planet that we found in Leo. That one might see us if their light is on. There's nothing. I don't think there's. So this is something we might disagree about. I don't think there's anything special about the Earth that would gain attention from an interstellar traveling, relativity bending, time warp traveling, interstellar traveling civilization. I don't see our technology won't have reached that far. They won't have a technological signal. They won't have that full light on.
They want to have a techno signature. I mean, when you say our light came on, our techno signature light just came on.
Right.
But our biosignature light, going all the way back past the dinosaurs and beyond that, for 2 billion years, there's been life on Earth. And we've had biosignatures for a long time. A significant, still a single-digit percentage of the life of the universe, but a fair period of time. And I know that we as humans and as human astrobiologists, we would be equally fascinated with any planet that has biosignatures, whether it has technosignatures or not.
Right.
We'd be just as happy to find alien bacteria as we would to be, alien heavy metal bands.
That's that whole story is about the possibility of bacteria toots on an exoplanet in Leo. Like that's the most of what that story could be, right? So
I don't know. James Webb is a fine telescope, but it's not really good enough to do great exoplanetary spectrum analysis. We really need to wait until the next generation of space telescopes to be able to really characterize exoplanetary spectra.
So here's the really down and dirty part, because I think that the life signature on Earth won't be that special. I think my opinion is that that's going to be on 15, 20 billion planets throughout the galaxy. So
I'd love for that to be true.
So, but here's the thing: the more likely, right, that it is that life exists in our galaxy, the less likely that an intelligent interstellar traveling civilization would see ours as special and worth visiting. That's the weird ratio, is that the greater the chances that they're out there, the less likely we're going to be visible within the sea of other planets that have life. And if they find 2 or 3 other lights on somewhere, well, your light isn't on, buddy. Your technological light isn't on. There, for all we can tell, nobody's home. We actually already have dinosaurs in our zoo anyway. So
I tell you what, I love the optimism of your version of the universe. I would love for you to be right, because that would be an amazing universe to live in.
It would be, but we'd never get there. But they wouldn't come and visit us, is the problem then. So, I kind of like yours better, where we're so obvious that, of course, this is where an advanced civilization would one day come and visit, and unfortunately, probably check us out and go, we'll keep looking.
The one thing that I refuse to subscribe to is the very fashionable notion that humans are so horrible and evil and don't care about the environment and don't care about each other that aliens would not want to visit us for that reason. That is a pop culture fad, sort of a self-loathing anti-human fad that I've never subscribed to and don't now. And I don't believe that that's a decision-making basis that we would use when we decide to go visit some alien planet that we were able to discover had a technosignature. Oh, yeah. Do we think they're worthy social justice-wise of visiting? I think our scientists would want to know everything about them regardless of that.
Yeah. Although I do think, though, if we've been monitoring a planet for a while, a future version of us who's become peaceful, because I think you have to become a somewhat peaceful civilization to achieve, that level of technological ability to travel through. It's just an assumption.
Yeah.
And they see over the course of observing a bunch of big nuclear explosions taking place on the surface of the planet that was actually caused by inhabitants of that planet. Why are they nuking themselves? And like, I don't know. I think if we were observing something like this, we might have a little hesitation. And if we did visit them, we might try to be elusive, non-confrontational, and maybe even try to keep it a secret.
I don't think we'd have much choice. I mean, that's the lower energy option anyway. If you're going to observe another planet, doing it in a way without landing and announcing yourself is the lower energy option and the easier option. And that's probably the one we're going to have no choice but to use in any event. So I think that if we saw a nuclear war happening on some other planet, I think our sociologists would be fascinated. I think our historians would be fascinated. And I know our biologists and everyone would be fascinated. I don't think for an instant that we'd decide, we choose not to learn about that planet. I don't believe that.
There's also, I don't know why it reminded me of our conversation today about this. I think it was an X-1 radio, sci-fi radio from like the 50s. There's an episode where there's aliens are communicating with Earth, and that they're on their way, and that they have advanced technology, and they're going to be taking over things and prepare for their arrival. And all of humanity is getting more and more nervous, and it's supposed to land. The UFO is supposed to land at this Air Force base, and it does. But I think the scenario is that it had the scale of our planet completely wrong, and it gets swallowed by a golden retriever. They just didn't realize the scale of the humans on this planet, maybe, or the life forms on this planet from afar away didn't look as big.
I love that.
I feel like I've used up all of your agreed time. I did tease ahead of time that I wanted to share with you the greatest time travel experiment of all time. Because if we get to this point where we're doing speed of light travel or faster than speed of light travel and want to get to that star while it's still on, want to get to the other Christmas tree when it's still on, we would need some sort of time traveling ability, or faster than speed of light, which puts you back in time. We'd need something like this. But you don't have to worry about all the grandfather paradoxes or the what was the all that stuff. You can, before any of that ripple effect of the past, before anybody's disappearing from a photograph, the first time travel experiment is going to be a big red button. And when you press that button, it's going to send a particle from your emitter to the detector on the wall, and a light will go on, and it'll go boop. And it's set up experimentally. We're going to test this out to go back in time 2 seconds. That's all you need to do. A particle of light going back in time 2 seconds. So when you hit the button, as I'm about to do now, it's boop. Oh, wait a second. Do I still press the button? Does it know that because I didn't press it yet, and it still went boop. Right? There's this we can test all determinism, whether the past exists but the future does not yet. We can test all of these things with a time traveling device of 2 seconds. That's all we need. And so whenever somebody's talking about time travel and everything else, the first experiment is actually the toughest. Whether or not you still have to press that big red button to fire your emitter after you've heard it go off. I thought about it too much.
I am thankful to be too stupid and too impatient for philosophy.
I get stuck in it. Because I'm that guy I was talking about who should be having a research project in front of them, but instead I spent the day watching too much YouTube videos, and so now I'm trying to figure out the universe from my couch.
Well, I'd sure rather be that guy.
Brian, I think we've had a wonderful conversation. We've used up the amount of time I was promised that I could steal you away. Is there anything though that you would like to talk about, discuss, or bring up here towards the end of the show?
Well, if I could tell people where to go see my movie, I would love to be able to do that.
Have we not mentioned the movie yet? Okay, I'm sorry. Like, let's start this over. Okay. My next guest is Brian Dunning, who is the producer and director and star of a new movie called The UFO Movie They Don't Want You to See.
Yay.
Where can we find this fine cinematic portrayal of
The movie's website is theufo.movie. And until I bought that domain, I didn't know that .movie was a thing, but it is. The UFO.movie, and it's available for rental right now, and it is imminently going to be available on Amazon Prime, Tubi, Apple TV, and probably a whole bunch of little minor streaming services that nobody's ever heard of. But it's not yet, right? But you can rent it and enjoy it right now on Vimeo. The current streaming options are always available at theufo.movie. Or search the streaming services for the UFO movie They Don't Want You to See.
I'm also down. Now I'm also becoming jealous and
just make a movie, Justin.
No, it's not the movie. It's the voice. You got that good radio voice on top of it. It's so unfair.
I can't advise you on that one. That was just luck or genetics or something. Or getting old. It wasn't this good when I was young. I sounded like this.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show. Is that really what we say every week?
No, so
I hope you enjoyed the show.
Kiki gave me a run of show document, and I'm following it down here with you because I'm supposed to jump in and say some stuff as well. So
okay.
Don't make me get lost.
I'm going to change that. I'm going to change that.
Oh no! Well, then I don't know where to come in.
Well, no, I'll the rest of it will be the same then. I'm going to say thank you for listening. We know you enjoyed the show. That feels like more confident. I hope.
I agree. We know you enjoyed.
Yeah, we know you enjoyed the show. That's why you're paying attention. Shout out to Fado for his help with social media and show notes. Gord for manning the chat room. ID4 for recording the show. Rachel for your amazing assistance and for editing out all my ums. And I'd like to thank our Patreon sponsors for their generous support. And I have a list of the sponsors right here. Thank you, patrons. Arthur Kepler, Craig Potts, Mary Goetz. I haven't had a chance to pronounce these right, so Goetz. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing it again. Teresa Smith, Richard Badge, Bob Cowles, Ken Northcote, Rick Loveman, George Corus, Pierre Velizarb, John Ratnaswamy, Carl Cornfield, Chris Wozniak, Vagard, Jonathan Styles, aka Don Stylo, Ali Coffin, Ragon, Shubrew, Sarah Forfar, Don Mundus, P.I.G., the notorious, Stefan Albaron, Daryl Mazurak, pronounced Myshak. Oh, it says the pronunciation in here. Daryl Myshak, Stu Pollock, Andrew Swanson, Fred S104, Sky Luke, Paul Ronovich, Kevin Reardon, Noodles, Jack, Brian Carrington, David E. Youngblood, Sean, Clarence Lamb, John McKee, Greg Riley, Mark Hassenflow, Steve Leishman, aka Zima. This is actually, Kiki makes this look really easy. She does it in the Micro Machines voice. Ken Hayes, Howard Tan, Christopher Rappin, Richard, Brendan Minish, Johnny Gridley, Remy Day, G. Burton Lattimore, Flying Out, Christopher Dreyer, Adium, Greg Briggs, John Atwood, Rudy Garcia, Dave Wilkinson, Rodney Lewis, Paul, Rick Ramos, Philip Shane, Kurt Larson, Craig Landon, Sue Doster, Jason Olds. There's more. David Neighbor, Eric Knapp, E.O., Adam Mission, Mishkan, David Parachan, Aaron Luthen, Steve DeBell, Bob Calder, Marjorie, Paul D. Disney, David Simile, Patrick Pecoraro, and as always, the amazing Tony Steele.
Wow, that's quite a list.
Oh my goodness. I think I took up.
Can I jump in and can I thank those people too? I mean,
Yeah.
people forget that people who do this kind of content production on a weekly basis, year after year after year after year, we really do depend on you, and we're only able to do it because of you. So that was an amazing list. I am humbled to be in the presence of such a list. Thank you all so much for supporting This Week in Science.
Thank you for that. Thank you. This is also, by the way, the reason that when we skipped the commercial in the middle of the show, the commercial break, we didn't tick off a sponsor because we don't use them. we just have it. It's we're like the PBS of podcasting. Right? We're all anyway. Thank you for the support on Patreon. If you are interested in supporting us, you can find information at patreon.com/thisweekinscience. On next week's show, we will be back Wednesday, 8 p.m. Pacific time, broadcasting live from our YouTube and Facebook channels. And again, for the show that I'm part of, which is on at Thursday, 5 a.m. Central European time. So look out for either of those shows.
What's Central European time?
That's Central European time. That's where Denmark is.
Okay, I'll buy that.
Thursday, 5 a.m. Central European time. Oh, you know what? It might actually be 8 p.m. Pacific time Wednesdays. It might actually be. Is there just one show? I'll have to look into it.
That's when I came on, 8 p.m. Pacific.
Oh, you did? You're not 5 a.m. Central European time on this?
Maybe I am, for all I know.
Well, wait a sec. So maybe there is only one show. I've been convinced that we've been doing 2 shows a week because the girls are doing it on Wednesday and I'm doing the show again on Thursday. But now I get it. Wait, does that mean the planet's round? Wait a second. That can't be right. I looked out the window. It doesn't look round. Anyway, you can catch us
on Q72D right now.
Yeah. Broadcasting live from our Facebook channels and from twis.org/live.
Want to listen to us as a podcast? Just search for This Week in Science wherever podcasts are found. And if you enjoyed the show, get your friends to subscribe too.
For more information on anything you've heard here today, show notes and links to stories will be available on our website, www.twis.org, where you can sign up for a newsletter, maybe. We do too many shows for a newsletter. This is the problem. We got to get rid of the newsletter. We do too many episodes. There's no downtime between shows where you could do a newsletter between we just bring it up on the next show.
Hey man, I do a newsletter.
Do you?
I do. In fact, you can contact us directly if you don't want the newsletter. In fact, and when I say us, I mean them. You can contact Justin and Kiki. Kirsten at This Week in Science. Did she say Kirsten?
Kirsten. She's Kirsten.
Kirsten?
I call her Kiki, so I could be wrong.
Yeah, I've always gone with Kiki too.
Yeah.
At twisminion@gmail.com or Blair at blairbaz@twis.org. Just put TWIS in the subject line so your email doesn't get spam filtered into oblivion or simply deleted.
You can also try to hit us up on the social platform formerly known as Twitter, where we are at TWIS Science, at Dr. Kiki, at Jackson Fly, and at Blair's Menagerie. I probably won't see it for the May. Some point I'm going to be like, oh, come on, just try it again. But I haven't been on for a while. If there's a topic, though, you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, a haiku that comes to you tonight, please let us know.
And we'll be back here next week, or they will. And because I'm probably fired after doing a bad job this week. But we/they hope they'll join us/them again for more great science news.
And if you learned anything from the show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science.
This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's This Week in Science. This Week in Science. This Week in Science. 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 This Week in 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 Science.